The Lord of the Rings. One ring to rule them all. But what if I told you that the hero didn't destroy the ring? The villain did. And the truth behind that changes everything. This isn't just a story about elves, wizards, and epic battles. It's about mercy, obsession, corruption, and the people who almost didn't make it out. And the real hero of this story, the one who saved the world, was the one everyone overlooked. This is the truth behind Middle-earth's most iconic characters. Gollum, one of Tolkien's darkest characters. At first glance, Gollum is a monster, twisted, whispering, crawling through the shadows. But Tolkien didn't write Gollum to be a simple villain. He's something far more tragic and far more terrifying. Because Gollum wasn't always a creature. Once, long ago, he was Smeagol, an ordinary hobbit-like being, living a quiet life by a river. And that's what makes him dangerous. He's proof that anyone, even the most innocent, can be broken by the wrong kind of power. Gollum's origin is simple. On his birthday, Smeagol ended his best friend's life over a piece of gold. But this isn't just about greed. It's about addiction, corruption, and the slow erosion of identity. The ring doesn't destroy him all at once. It takes its time, stretching his life unnaturally, hollowing him out until there's almost nothing left except obsession. Tolkien once described the ring as an external will that dominates your own. For Gollum, that domination is complete. And there's another layer, mythology, of course. Tolkien, a scholar of Norse and Germanic myths, likely drew on legends of creatures twisted by obsession and greed. Think of the old tale of Fafnir, a dwarf who ends the life of his own father for gold and is transformed into a dragon consumed by his lust for wealth. Gollum is Tolkien's version of Fafnir, not a dragon, but a creature so consumed by desire, he's lost all traces of who he was. There's even a biblical echo here. Gollum's fall shares similarities with the story of Cain and Abel, brothers torn apart by jealousy and violence. Cain took Abel's life. Cain was then marked and cast out to wander, never finding peace. Gollum is marked spiritually. The ring has branded him. He can't escape it. And then there's the darkest truth of all. Gollum and Frodo aren't opposites. They're mirrors. Frodo sees what he could become. Both carry the ring. Both feel its pull. Both walk the razor's edge between holding on and losing themselves completely. By the end, it's Gollum who destroys the ring. Not because he chooses to, but because he's so consumed by it, he dies for it. And that's Tolkien's final warning. Sometimes the things we cling to the tightest are the very things that destroy us. When you think of fantasy heroes, you probably imagine warriors, swords raised, armies behind them, born for battle. But Frodo Baggins, he's the opposite. He's not chosen because he's the strongest, fastest, or bravest. He's chosen because he's extremely ordinary, a quiet hobbit from the Shire, someone who never wanted adventure, never sought power. But Tolkien didn't make Frodo the hero by accident, because Frodo isn't just a character. He's a reflection of something much darker, something Tolkien saw firsthand. But here's the dark truth. Frodo represents every soldier who was sent off to war carrying a burden too heavy. Young, unprepared, but forced to survive something unimaginable. J.R.R. Tolkien watched young men, barely more than boys, shipped off to face horrors they were never prepared for. Frodo represents those soldiers, thrown into a conflict they didn't start, carrying a burden they never asked for. And yet, He's the one chosen to carry the most dangerous object in Middle-earth. At first, it seems small, harmless. A simple gold band tucked in Frodo's pocket. The ring doesn't test your muscles. It tests your will. It isolates you. It makes you paranoid. It whispers until your mind turns against itself. But here's the truth. He doesn't win. Over time, it wears him down. It isolates him. It changes how he sees the world and himself. At the edge of Mount Doom, after years of suffering and sacrifice, Frodo puts the ring on. He claims it. He fails. And that failure, it's not a flaw in the story. It is the story. Because Frodo was never meant to beat the ring. That's the illusion. No one can conquer that kind of power alone. And that's the point Tolkien was making. Power corrupts everyone, even the good ones. He carried the burden as far as anyone could. And in the end, it's not his strength that destroys the ring. It's Gollum, the creature he showed mercy to. Frodo couldn't save the world, but his mercy did. Tolkien wasn't writing about perfect heroes. He was writing about the cost of survival, about how some people come home with scars so deep they never really heal. So was Frodo a failure? Maybe. But that's what makes him real. He shows us that you can fall and still matter, that you can break and still be brave, that sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is simply keep going. The ring is greedy. It wants to be found. It drives people mad to keep itself alive. But in the end, that same greed destroys it. Gollum's obsession, Frodo's failure, the fight on the edge of the fire. It's the ring's own power that brings about its end. Not a hero's sword, not a noble sacrifice, but a twist of fate born from the very corruption it created. Frodo didn't save the world by destroying the ring, because he didn't destroy it. He gives in. The hero loses, but somehow the ring is still destroyed. How? Gollum, the creature everyone hated. The one Sam wanted gone 12 times over. The one who hissed, lied, betrayed, and begged. And the only reason Gollum is even still alive at the end is because Frodo showed him mercy. At the time, it felt naive, too soft, a mistake. But in the end, that mercy is what saved everything. Because when Frodo claimed the ring, Gollum was still there. He attacked. He bit off Frodo's finger. And in the chaos of obsession, madness, and greed, Gollum falls into the fire. And the ring is destroyed by the same force that had consumed so many before. The ring's undoing was its greatest strength. The very greed that made it powerful is what destroyed it. Frodo didn't have the strength to let go, but his earlier choice to spare Gollum made the ending possible. That's the real twist. Mercy, not might, saved Middle-earth. Here's the part most people miss. Frodo doesn't win, not fully. Even after the ring is destroyed, by the end, Frodo isn't the same person who left the Shire. Just like countless soldiers who returned from war, he's scarred. Not visibly, but deep inside. Frodo's battle isn't physical, it's psychological. He's not fighting with swords and shields. He's fighting the slow, creeping weight of something that won't let him go. Every step closer to Mount Doom, the heavier the burden becomes. He pushes on, not because he's fearless, but because he has to. Frodo can't go back to who he was. He returns to the Shire, but he can't find peace. Tolkien knew that feeling well. He lived with the weight long after the war ended. It's no coincidence that Frodo leaves Middle-earth at the end. Crossing the sea to the Undying Lands isn't just a fantasy escape. It's Tolkien's way of saying, some wounds don't heal in this world. Frodo doesn't fight with brute strength. He fights by enduring, by carrying the unbearable weight long enough for others to act, by surviving even when it breaks him. Because sometimes the strongest hero isn't the one who swings the sword. It's the one who bears the burden and keeps going. That's why Frodo's story matters. It's not just about magic. It's about trauma, sacrifice, and what happens to ordinary people caught in extraordinary darkness. Samwise Gamgee isn't just the loyal sidekick. He's the real hero, and Tolkien said so himself. Tolkien once said, "My Sam Gamgee is indeed a reflection of the English soldier, of the privates and batmen I knew in the war, and recognized as so far superior to myself." Sam doesn't carry the ring. He carries Frodo. He carries the hope, the loyalty, the belief that something good is still worth fighting for. Sam is a tribute to the everyday heroes who never asked to be remembered, but should be. But Tolkien didn't just make Sam the loyal sidekick by accident, because if Frodo is the soldier burdened by war, Sam is every friend who carried those soldiers when they couldn't go on. They were the soldiers Tolkien fought beside in World War I, working-class men who never questioned orders, who endured unspeakable conditions, who kept their humanity in a world gone mad. Sam isn't flashy. He's not a king, a wizard, or a chosen hero. He's a gardener. Sam's strength isn't in battle, it's in loyalty. Every time Frodo stumbles, Sam is there. He doesn't carry the ring, but when Frodo can't move, Sam carries him. Because Sam's role isn't to be the chosen one. It's to hold the line when the chosen one breaks. Here's what most people miss. Sam doesn't get glory. No songs, no titles. He carries the weight of watching someone he loves fall apart and keeps going anyway. That's not weakness. That's the hardest strength there is. And when it's all over, Frodo leaves. He can't heal. But Sam stays behind. He plants gardens, builds a family, and quietly rebuilds the world Frodo couldn't stay in. Tolkien knew men like that, the ones who came home from the trenches, haunted, but determined to make something beautiful out of the wreckage. Sam is hope. In a world filled with kings, monsters, and dark lords. Sometimes, the strongest person isn't the one carrying the power. It's the one carrying the people who can't carry themselves. Galadriel appears untouchable, a queen cloaked in light, older than kingdoms, distant and serene. But Tolkien didn't create her to be just another mystical figure. She's modeled after ancient archetypes, Norse goddesses, powerful, yet elusive, pure, wise, revered. Tolkien wrote in a letter that Galadriel has some likeness to the Jesus' mother Mary. Scholars also note similarities between Galadriel and Norse goddesses like Frigg or the Valkyries, powerful, remote, and associated with wisdom, fate, and light. Frigg, Odin's wife, a seeress who knows the future but doesn't reveal it. Very Galadriel, who perceives much but speaks cryptically. The Valkyries, warriors who guide souls to the afterlife, often shining and ethereal, similar to Galadriel's role as a guide and guardian for the Fellowship. On the surface, she's the embodiment of perfection. But here's the truth. Galadriel faces the same temptation as everyone else, the desire for control, for power, for dominance. She's no stranger to ambition. In fact, she's one of the Noldor elves, born in Valinor, the undying lands beyond the sea. She leaves by choice. Fueled by pride and curiosity, she follows her kin into exile, choosing Middle-earth not out of necessity, but out of defiance. For centuries, She rules her hidden kingdom, knowing exactly how fragile light is when surrounded by shadow. When she shows Frodo the mirror of Galadriel, it's not just magic, it's a warning. The mirror is a magical device that shows possible futures, not certain ones. Galadriel warns Frodo that these visions are not guaranteed, and that trying to control them could lead to ruin. That reflects Tolkien's core belief. Trying to control fate corrupts you. And then the test comes. Frodo offers her the One Ring, the very object that has shattered kings, corrupted wizards, and enslaved entire races. For a moment, she imagines herself transformed, beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night, stronger than the foundations of the earth. It's not a hypothetical fantasy. She knows the kind of ruler she could become. All-powerful, unchallenged, worshipped. But then she steps back. She refuses. In that moment, Tolkien shows us something crucial. The true strength of Galadriel isn't her magic or her age. It's her ability to walk away from absolute power. This was intentional. In Galadriel's story, the most dangerous temptation is the desire to control others. In a world filled with kings and warlords, she represents a different kind of strength: restraint, self-awareness, the wisdom to see how power corrupts, and the courage to let it go. Gandalf is not just a wise old wizard. He's a fusion of Norse gods, ancient myths, and the shadows of war leadership. Let's start with his iconic look: a long grey cloak, a tall staff, a brimmed hat, a wandering figure who shows up exactly when he's needed. Sound familiar? It should, because centuries before Gandalf walked Middle-earth, there was another figure wandering the ancient world: Odin. In Norse mythology, Odin, the All-Father, wasn't just the god of wisdom and war. He often disguised himself as a wanderer, a grey-bearded old man, cloaked with a staff, who roamed the world testing mortals, offering guidance, and hiding immense power behind a humble appearance. Tolkien wasn't pulling this out of thin air. He was a scholar of Old Norse literature. He studied the poetic Edda, the sagas, and immersed himself in Viking myth. The figure of Gandalf is based on the Norse deity Odin in his incarnation as the Wanderer. Tolkien even wrote in a 1946 letter that he thought of Gandalf as an Odinic wanderer. Odin's presence runs deep within Gandalf. But that's not all. Gandalf also channels the classic mentor wise old man trope. Like Merlin, the one who doesn't reveal everything, lets others take the risk, and always seems to know more than he leads on. Just like Merlin, Gandalf is the guide, the mentor, the one who sets others on their path, but never reveals all the answers. He offers wisdom, but never control. But the real-world inspiration for Gandalf goes deeper, because Tolkien didn't just study myths. He fought in one of the deadliest wars in history. Tolkien fought in World War I, specifically the Battle of the Somme, one of the bloodiest battles ever. He lost close friends in the trenches. Tolkien's wartime experience deeply shaped his views on leadership, power, and sacrifice. Tolkien despised blind, brute force leadership. He valued wisdom, loyalty, strategy, and restraint. But scholars and Tolkien himself often tie the ethos of leadership, especially Gandalf's approach, to Tolkien's disillusionment with war leaders and admiration for quiet, moral, behind-the-scenes strength. And when you've spent time in trenches watching leaders make decisions that cost lives, your idea of power changes. Underneath it all, Gandalf isn't just a wizard. He's the kind of leader Tolkien believed the world needed, a strategist who doesn't command armies with brute force, but moves the right pieces at the right time. Calm on the outside, but carrying the weight of every battle inside. He's not a king. He's not a god. He's something else entirely. The one behind the scenes, shaping history without ever sitting on a throne. Because real power doesn't always need a crown. It just needs to calculate when to make the next move. But there's something else about Gandalf people often overlook. Why is there a Gandalf the Grey and a Gandalf the White? And what does that transformation actually mean? Gandalf starts as Gandalf the Grey, humble, wandering, more hands-on. He's the guide who gets involved, who walks with the people, who's not above getting his hands dirty. The color grey reflects that. He's in the middle, not all-powerful, not fully removed. He's fallible, and he's constantly testing others while learning himself. But when Gandalf faces the Balrog and dies, something shifts. He returns not as Gandalf the Grey, but Gandalf the White. And that change isn't just cosmetic, it's a transformation of purpose. In Tolkien's lore, Gandalf is a Maya, a divine spirit sent to Middle-earth to guide, not to dominate. His resurrection as Gandalf the White means he's now been entrusted with more authority. He steps into Saruman's old role, the White Wizard, because Saruman fell to corruption. Gandalf the White is no longer just the wandering guide. He's the figure who commands, who unifies, who stands fully against evil without compromise. But there's an even older story hidden in Gandalf's transformation, one straight out of Norse myth. In ancient legend, Odin sacrificed himself by hanging from Yggdrasil, the world tree, pierced by his own spear. He hung there for 9 nights in pain between life and death. Why? To gain wisdom, to unlock the secrets of the runes, powerful knowledge that came only through suffering. Similarly, we see Gandalf's fall into shadow, his battle with the Balrog, his death and return, is Tolkien's echo of that same myth. A descent into darkness, not for glory, but for insight. When Gandalf returns, he's no longer the Grey Wanderer. He's the White, a leader reborn, carrying the weight of what he's learned in death. It also reflects Tolkien's belief in sacrifice, in dying to your old self to become something greater, the leader Middle-earth needs in its darkest hour. Frodo may have carried the ring, but he wasn't the only one burdened by it. Gandalf, Galadriel, Gollum, Sam, they all carried something: fear, temptation, obsession, hope. And in the end, it wasn't a warrior's strength that saved Middle-earth. It was the choices they made, to resist, to endure, to let go. Gandalf chose wisdom over power. Galadriel chose restraint over domination. Gollum, consumed by his own obsession, became the instrument of its destruction. And Sam, the one who never sought glory, chose to carry the hero. Because sometimes the bravest act isn't to stand in the spotlight. It's to stand by someone who can't stand on their own. That's Tolkien's truth, that the greatest battles aren't always fought with swords. They are fought within, against pride, fear, and the desire for control. And maybe, just maybe, the real heroes are the ones who choose not to take power, but to let it go. Because the one truth that ruled them all is that power only has as much hold as we're willing to give it. Let me know which character is your favorite, and and which one should I cover next? If you made it this far, don't forget to leave a like, and if you want to go on more adventures into Middle-earth, subscribe as a seeker. If you liked this deep dive into Lord of the Rings, be sure to check out my deep dive into Chronicles of Narnia. Thanks for watching.